You're on mute, Mr. Secretary. You're on mute, Mr. Secretary.
I've only been using Zoom for 4 years. I'll figure this out. Good morning, everybody. It's 9:02 a.m. on August 13th, 2024. This is a special meeting of the Kentucky State Board of Elections. I'm Michael Adams, the Secretary of State and Chair of the board. We have called a special meeting in order to expeditiously finalize the voting plans of our various counties for the November election. I'll call us to order, and I'll start by recognizing each member for attendance. I'll go in the order that I see you. Member Perry.
Sue Carol Perry, member, Shelby County.
Member Ferris.
Eric Ferris, member, Jefferson County.
Member Skolnick.
Good morning, Corey Skolnick, member, Jefferson County.
Member Brangers.
Good morning, Deanna Brangers, member, Jefferson County.
Member Sears.
Good morning, Dwight Sears, member, Pulaski County.
Member Johnson.
Good morning, Jerry Johnson, member, Franklin County.
Member Chandler.
Good morning, Ben Chandler, member, Woodford County.
So we do have a quorum, and we'll proceed to our business. First is to approve minutes for our July 16th, 2024 meeting. Do we have a motion?
So move.
A second?
Second.
I do have one correction for the record on page 2, about midway through. I think we all understand what this meant, but just for clarity for others who might read it. Midway through, it says Mr. Johnson amended this motion. He stated he would move to set aside the Bullitt County plan. I think we all know what that meant, but in the context, could we clarify that to say that he would remove Bullitt County from his motion for approval? He wasn't moving to set it aside, which would be a rejection. Is that okay with you, Member Johnson?
Absolutely.
Okay. With that change, if that's amenable to everybody, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. So next we have 30 remaining county plans for approval. I'm going to read the list of those plans, and then we'll entertain any motions. Here are the following counties whose plans have not yet been approved by the board. There are 30. Barron, Bath, Boyle, Breathitt, Bullitt, Caldwell, Carlisle, Casey, Christian, Edmondson, Elliott, Fleming, Fulton, Garrett, Grayson, Green, Henry, Johnson, LaRue, Lee, Lewis, McGoffin, Marion, Martin, McLean, Owen, Pulaski, Rockcastle, Washington, and Webster. So I think we have some guests here today. I think we can do this one of two ways. We can either pass the ones that we have no issue with and then have another motion, or we can just have one joint motion for all of them. And I guess it comes out the same way, but I'll entertain any motions you all have for approval. Member Ferris, do you need to recuse on Bullitt?
Yeah, I do. Yes, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I was going to ask perhaps if we could go ahead and defer that one till later, and then I could participate in the others, and then for the record, recuse and allow the others to speak on it.
Of course. Member Johnson?
If appropriate, I'd like to move that we approve all plans before us except for Bullitt and Kenton County, for us to be able to have additional conversations afterwards.
So I'm glad that you mentioned Kenton. I forgot to mention Kenton. Kenton, since we last met, has changed their plan modestly, but I think to be cautious, we should take it up for reapproval since it has changed since we approved it. So I appreciate that that note. So the motion is to approve 29 of the 30.
29, yeah.
Yeah, 29 of the 30 that we just discussed, all of them except for Bullitt. And are we holding Kenton or are we including Kenton, Member Johnson, in this motion?
I mean, I'll defer to the group. I didn't know if we wanted to have some level of conversation about the change. Either way, it's just, since we're having discussions that are separate from the others, I thought it might not be bad for us at least to spend just a moment talking about Kenton before approving, but I'm open. What do others feel?
I second the motion to go ahead and approve 28 out of 30 plans, leaving Bullitt and Kenton for further discussion.
So there are 29 plans, not counting Kenton or Bullitt. So the motion is to approve the 30 I named a second ago, all of them except for Bullitt, and then we'll separately take up the reapproval of Kenton. That's the motion on the table.
Well, I'll second that. I'll second that motion.
Very good. Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on, I can read them again if it's helpful, but the 29 that are not Bullitt or Kenton? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. Well, let's do this. I don't think we have anyone from Kenton physically present. I think we have Gabe available if we need her via Zoom. So why don't we take up Bullitt first, since we have some guests. I actually can't see who's in the room there from here. But Karen, if you wouldn't mind to introduce our guests, and then let's give them some time to speak about the Bullitt County plan.
Right. Kevin Mooney, Bullitt County Clerk, is here present in person. Keith Miller has the ability, he can bring in 3 members from the Bullitt County Superintendent's office. It would be the attorney, Mike Owsley, Superintendent Jesse Bacon, and the Chief Operating Officer, I believe is his title, Troy Wood. As well in the room at this point to be brought in is Tammy Baker, who is the Bullitt County Clerk. And or Bullitt County Attorney, I'm sorry. Thank you, Kevin. If Keith, if you could admit those 4, we would appreciate it. I'll turn it back over to Secretary Adams.
And the only of those 4, Troy Wood is the only one not yet in the waiting room. So we'll let the other 3 in right now.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I think we'll start with Kevin. And Kevin, I know you discussed your plan with us at our last meeting. We didn't vote on it, but we did entertain discussion about it. If you could come back and speak again and talk really just specifically about what's developed since you spoke to us on the 16th of July.
Sure. My county attorney and I met with Dr. Bacon, Mr. Owsley, once in the county attorney's office. Following that, the Superintendent Bacon and I had a meeting in my office, just the 2 of us, and he offered that I could use, he was very, he explained a lot of things about the 2 high schools and the amount of activity in the high schools, specifically Bullitt East and North Bullitt High School, and what it was going to do related to their operations if they were used for 3-day early voting. ultimately, he did bring up an offer to you that we could use Eastside Middle and Zonton Middle. Ultimately, we, in the course of looking at things, sizes of parking lots, traffic flow, and things that Zonton Middle School is a good location to use, and that, but we did change to a different middle school in the Mount Washington area and an elementary school. Mount Washington Middle, Jim has excellent parking, a little bit easier to get in and get out safely as opposed to compared to Eastside. Also decided that Mount Washington Elementary School as well, comparable reasons. And with that, it also picks us up a little bit more capacity for voter check-in by using these two locations in the east, which is actually where my largest city is now in Bullitt County. Mount Washington population exceeds Shepherdsville. And so we knew that significant capacity we believe is needed in the east. And so this increases our ability to serve in the east for 3-day. These two locations will be used for Election Day. Also, Bullitt East High School and North Bullitt High School will be brought back for Election Day only. And everything else is regarding the plan is pretty much static, and there's no changes beyond that.
Thank you. Any questions for Kevin from the members? Okay, I'm going to invite our guests to say a few words. I'll start in the order that I see you, Ms. Baker.
Thank you. Good morning, Secretary Adams. Good morning, board. I really don't have anything to add over what Kevin Mooney had stated. I'm the county attorney in Bullitt County. We did have that meeting that Mr. Mooney had talked about with Mr. Owsley and Dr. Bacon and Troy Wood from the school system. After that, Mr. Mooney advised me that he did meet with Dr. Bacon and they had come to some sort of an understanding, which then I was a little surprised to see Mr. Owsley's filing to the board saying that we didn't have an agreement. So I'd be interested to hear what the school system has to say this morning after Mr. Mooney just spoke.
Okay, Mr. Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank the board for hearing us. I believe in terms of my correspondence with Ms. Sellers that my letter of the 9th of August has been distributed to all the board members. And I also copied Mr. Mooney and Ms. Baker on it so that they would all have our position. I appreciate Mr. Mooney's discussions with regard to the high schools. Of course, that was at that time on the 9th that when I wrote that letter, and of course it took us several days, that was our understanding that they were still looking at Bullitt East and North Bullitt. However, since he's no longer looking at those two high schools, I can skip over that part of our position, which had to do mainly with extracurricular activities and the construction. The primary problem is the state statute requires that if a school in the district is used as a polling place, the district, not the school, shall be closed on the day of the election. And so our interpretation of that, and there aren't any cases because we've just had early voting for a few years, our interpretation of that is that if the State Board of Election is to approve this plan or the prior plan suggested by Mr. Mooney, the district is required to close. And that means Mr. Mooney would be bringing his equipment in on the Wednesday before the early voting and not picking it up until the Wednesday after the regular election on Tuesday. So the the district would be closed for a week in the spring and a week in the fall if that pattern were to continue. And the effect upon the school district is just significant. And I've outlined in our letter the impact on the quality of education And we've also provided to the Board of Elections alternative locations as set out in the chart, which is, we think, very workable. And for this can't be really a surprise to Mr. Mooney in the sense that the district notified him back in 2 years ago in the summer of 22 that the district was not going to be available for early voting in the future. We don't believe that that is justified. We don't find any district in the state being asked to provide a school. Scott County is providing one building. There are no schools in that building. There's no children in that building. And that, to our knowledge, of all the districts in the state, there aren't any other districts being asked to provide school district facilities for early voting. We acknowledge regular voting, want to cooperate with Mr. Mooney in that regard, because the regular voting, the school district would be closed in any event. Mr. Bacon, Dr. Bacon is here, and Troy Wood is here virtually and can add any comments that they feel are appropriate. We think we provided reasonable alternatives, and we just don't think that closing the school for a week in the spring and a week in the fall is viable, particularly when we all know from the pandemic involving COVID-19 that very ineffective results from NTI instruction. It just is not effective in educating children. And so we don't understand why this has to be this way. I do invite either Dr. Bacon or Mr. Wood to comment further if they feel a need to. And I recognize the board has limited amount of time, so we'll try to be brief. Dr. Bacon, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Sure, I'd be happy to add to. First of all, I just want to say I have great respect for all of our county clerks and the job that they have to do and the job that you have to do to ensure that we have fair and accurate election processes in all counties. And so having said that, I also want to reiterate that we did, Mr. Mooney and I did have a meeting in his office, just the two of us, on August the 2nd. And it was my desire to try and come up with a workable solution for this so that we could collaborate together and not have to go through this process. Ultimately, any scenario that would require us to close a district is extremely problematic. And so at the time when we had that discussion, our position was that we preferred that we not have early voting in our schools for the safety aspect of that would create and the issues with the Kentucky school safety laws that are on the books. And then also the inconvenience of our 13,000 students and families that would be impacted by us having a closed school and the precedent that would set for future fall and spring elections and the times of the years that those take place. And so my offer to Mr. Mooney was to collaborate together. He expressed some concerns around being able to notify voters of where they're supposed to go. We have a robust communications team available. So I offered those services that we could create videos, do a public blitz to help spread the word on where early voting locations would take place. We offered to even start a program that would allow our high school students who are age appropriate to be released for service credit to do poll working and to work collaboratively with the Board of Elections to work those early voting locations if we could find places outside of our buildings in order to be able to house those. And then I left it ultimately with, if the State Board of Elections feels that it is appropriate to use school buildings, we had to come off of our high schools to give us at least the opportunity to be able to continue to have school. Since that time, we've learned about KRS 158070, particularly 5B, that does require us to close. So it doesn't seem that would be even be an option for us. If the State Board of Elections approves the plan as it's presented, we would have no other choice but to close school. And I know that would be an extreme hardship to our families who already have plans based on the calendar that's been approved for almost 6 months now. And so, that's the position. We feel like that there are adequate locations outside of our school buildings, and we're willing to assist in any way possible to ensure that those election and polling locations would be successful locations for our community. We'll do our part to make sure that we work with the clerk's office to do anything we can to support that.
Did we have any other guests that would like to speak before we come back to the members?
I think Troy Wood is here. I don't know if he feels like he needs to add anything. Do you, Mr. Wood? Maybe he's not here. I might have misspoke.
We had another issue in court that he had to
All
attend
right,
to today.
that I stand corrected. Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
Kevin, did you want to offer any sort of rebuttal, or should we just move on to our members' questions?
I will say that please keep in mind what the legislature decided was appropriate. They made a modification to 117.065, paragraph 2, with regard to the use of taxpayer-funded buildings. In Bullitt County, the best buildings that we have in our community are the school buildings. We have private buildings, but we cannot be guaranteed being able to access them from one election to the next. We have continued to move our voters in both May and November elections because of other things on the calendars in these buildings. Pre-pandemic, we used the schools. The population of voters knew where those locations were. They were always the same. And I'm trying to get Bullitt back to a model comparable to what was made available for the public pre-pandemic, and that they had memory and they had knowledge from one election to the next, what was available to them and where they could go vote.
Okay, thanks. I'll bring this back to the members if any of you all have any questions or comments.
Secretary Adams, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I actually have a question both for Clerk Mooney and for the school system. And let me just start by saying I think everybody here is trying to do the right thing. So thank you to all of you for your principles and trying to do the right thing for your community. My questions for Clerk Mooney, I guess, are, do you agree with the school board that they would have to close the district if they in fact use any of the schools? And then the second question would be, the alternative locations that they've put in their letter, are those unavailable, or what is the status of looking into those?
I am a county clerk. I am not an election official. So I don't know everything regarding that, what is available or not available to them. I know that there was exception made for them. I believe it was in 22 to allow us in East Side Middle School, I believe was the only location that was approved. But ultimately they were able to get exception to have the school open. We were able to get into a gym that had exterior doors. It did not require the public to be inside the school building. I don't understand why that may not be available now when it was made available in the past. Some of these locations that we've looked at or that they have listed in here are churches, and their gyms are not available through the week to us because of activities that they have going on, and that they do not wish to, they're not ready to change their calendar. And I understand that, but they are also, and I have no control to be able to say, well, you have to give it up to me because they are privately owned property. They are privately owned institutions, and the legislature did not address private property. It only addressed taxpayer funded.
Thank you. And then my question for the school system is, assuming that you were able to keep the elementary and middle school open, would you still object to the current plan?
I probably
would.
defer to Dr. Bacon on that. I'm sorry, Jesse, I didn't mean to step on you. Go ahead, sir.
I would, simply for the safety and security concerns that I have. We live in a pretty charged political environment right now, and the agreed upon plan from 2022 that Mr. Mooney referenced was supposed to include security for doorways from the place where the polling was taking place into the regular school building. That did not come through. We didn't get that. And so I'm really hesitant to allow members of the community to enter our building, which goes against all of the public or all of the school safety laws and regulations that are on the books right now for how visitors are to access school ground property during school time. And so I have huge reservations about allowing that to happen in 3 of our schools when we're in an environment right now that is a little bit more uneasy even than it was in 2022.
Thanks. That's all the questions I have right now, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Please proceed.
What facilities were used in 2020 during early voting? Because we don't have any question about election day. There's no dispute about election day. We're only talking about early voting. We had quite a number of days of early voting in 2020, and Bullitt County somehow accommodated those days, and I'm just curious to know how they did it.
In 2020, we utilized the Paraquet Springs Conference Center. It's in Shepherdsville. It's in the center of the county, centrally located. We also had 18 days of early voting available. So the time window was stretched out dramatically larger and different than anything we have today to work with. But that was the only location we had in Bullitt County for the public to come and vote. We had significant by mail because that was the means of choice, and everything was deemed absentee voting in that particular election cycle.
You don't think that could be used again in this cycle?
I'm sorry. Can you say again?
Can that be used again in this cycle?
Yes, sir. It is in the plan. It is part of our 3-day early voting as well as election day. That building is funded with a 2% food tax in Bullitt County. And so that is a taxpayer funded building that we're using. And they have been remarkably good to get along with. We're in their house and we tie up some of their retail space that they could rent to various users, but ultimately they allow me to have access to the building for both 3-day and election day.
But you don't think that building is sufficient for the entire county?
No.
Just for the early voting days.
Does everybody here remember, I was asked following November of 22 that I needed to increase capacity. I needed to increase the sizing and the locations in Bullitt County because of the lines that we had, because of the helicopter flyover and all of the optic. It was pretty well known that while we thought we had significant enough capacity, it was determined we didn't. And that's why this plan looks like what it looks like. We're trying to spread out to the east, the north, and the central where my population centers are. The west and the south are small, and those two are different. So Paraquet can handle a significant amount of voters. Based on November 22, I don't believe it can handle all of it.
Did those lines that occurred in 2020, were they only on election day, or did you also have lines on early voting days?
You said 2020. Are you meaning 22?
Maybe. No, I think I mean 2020. No, that's right. Whatever the pandemic election was. I'm sorry.
Okay, that would be 2020. In 2020, it was a different thing. And we had 18 days of by mail of early voting available, as well as by mail voting that was available. We only have 3 days of early voting at this point, along with election day. That's an apple and an orange. They are remarkably hard to compare. And we did not have lines per se, but we had it spread out over effectively 19 days of voting for the public to go up.
Member Chandler, it was 2022 when the things that Kevin was talking about were occurring in terms of the lines and the helicopters and all of that. That's what prompted the legislature to change the law to increase the ability of the clerks to commandeer publicly funded buildings. So to his point, in 2020, we had one place, but we also had 3 weeks. And now that we have 3 days, the notion is we need more locations. And Bullitt was sort of ground zero for that.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, and this is actually more for probably Karen or Richard, but it's my understanding that we have maybe a couple, I can't remember for sure, because I don't have everything in front of me, some other school districts that are utilized for maybe early voting. Can you all tell me, am I correct? Or if I am correct, are they closing schools on those days? Because I think, what we have here is the legislature recently kind of added some updates to a law and then probably didn't look for potential conflicts at other areas of the law. And that's kind of where we find ourselves today.
Knox. Knox County has early voting in their high school, their county high school. They also have a private school with a separate entrance, just as the public school, the public high school. And the private school has allowed them to use that location for early voting as well as election day. Both of those places are also on election day. That's the one I know of for sure off the top of my head right this minute. Richard may.
I can't think of any other ones other than these.
That's the one I can think of right off the top of my head. And actually, I visited them in early voting in May. So.
I've got a question for Mr. Owsley, I think. Assume for the moment that this plan is approved and goes into motion and the school district does not as a whole close. Is there a party of interest that would have standing to sue the school district and compel them to close all the schools? And if so, is that a likely scenario?
Well, I think any parent would have standing. I cannot comment, Mr. Adams, about the likely scenario. I mean, the problem is if Dr. Bacon and the school board ask our opinion, we're going to say that violates the statute. And if you do that, you run the risk of litigation. And I don't know what your defense is when the statutes go clear. So that's one other thing I could maybe ask about. We had asked Mr. Mooney for the vote in the primary and in the general elections the last 2 times by early voting location. In other words, how many votes were actually cast in early voting. He referred us to the State Board of Election website, which we accessed, and it's not on there, and we confirmed that with Ms. Sellers. So then we went back to Mr. Mooney and said, it's not there. We don't have any data as to how many people voted by early voting location. And so, I mean, he represents a certain number voted overall, and I accept that number, but that doesn't tell us how many voted in each location. And so that would be helpful to have, but we don't have that information today.
Can I ask you a second question?
Sure.
Of the alternative locations that you offered, do you know if they are willing and able to serve as locations as alternatives?
Troy Wood ran that to ground, Mr. Secretary, and he's not on this call because of an emergency in the district. I'm not sure if Dr. Bacon can answer that. I don't know. I'd ask Dr. Troy Wood to determine what locations were suitable. And I don't know whether Dr. Bacon knows whether or not any of those folks were contacted about whether they would agree to permit them to be used. Do you know, Jesse?
Yeah, we believe that they are based on the conversations that we've had with folks in those locations.
So they're not just good potential. You've actually communicated with them, and they've offered a willingness.
Yes.
Any other members? Member Johnson?
Is Taylor in the room? Oh, yeah, there he is. So a couple of questions, Taylor, if I might. Considering this is the first time first time I can remember we've dealt with this particular issue. As I read it, and I'm not an attorney, but it referenced the clerk having the ability to do this with public buildings, taxpayer building, funded buildings. If we take an action to disapprove the plan as submitted, does the clerk have any other recourse beyond that, or are they required by election law to follow our guidance?
So, thank you, Member Johnson. A couple things. The whole county plan model it is assuming that a county board of elections is wanting to abandon the precinct model, and they're asking to consolidate their locations, consolidate their precincts, having a vote center, having some other model than just the pre-2020 precinct model that Kentucky has operated under. So if that plan to consolidate in whatever stage it comes to the board as is rejected, then yeah, the alternative is to open all precincts. But I did want to just throw this out to something Mr. Owsley said. I do agree that this is something new that hasn't had a chance to go before the courts or anything like that yet, given its infancy. But he mentioned what a defense might be. And I just want to share with the board my reading of this as we proceed. So the 158.070 statute that was referenced about shutting the schools down, or shutting the whole district down, I guess, says that if any school in a district is used as a polling place, the school district shall be closed on the day of the election. I think it's important to remember that as much as we treat in practice the early days, the in-person absentee days are still absentee voting days, right? So I think you can read the day of the election in that statute to mean just the Tuesday, because that is the day of the election. All the other days of early voting are still in-person absentee days. And then again, to this hasn't been before the courts aspect. School, I don't see school defined in this statute as well. And as I understand it, I'm not sure about Knox County's plan, but to Clerk Mooney's plan, we're talking about using the gyms, not the actual instructional buildings. So does school mean any property owned by the district? Does it mean the actual instructional buildings? That part's unclear, but I think we would have a decent argument that the rest of the days, like I said, are still absentee days, and you could read day of election to be just Tuesday, and that we wouldn't actually be using schools themselves as instructional part of the school or of a building, we would be using an ancillary piece of property owned by the district. So a little bit more than what you asked, Member Johnson, but I did just
That's fine.
respond.
If I may respond to that last comment, given the size and population of our schools, our gyms are instructional spaces. Classrooms happen and instruction happens in those locations every minute of the day. And so I think that's important to note as well.
All right. Anyone else with a question?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the school district has suggested some alternative locations. They say that those locations are available. Is it possible for the county clerk to check and see if those locations are suitable and available?
Can I answer?
Please do.
Okay. So the Jesse Schott building is a building that we have used in the past. And the building interior is significant, but the amount of parking spaces, while it says approximately 90, it is a tight parking lot area. It is not comparable to a parking lot at the school facilities or at the Paraquet Springs Conference Center. Calvary Christian, a lot of parking spaces. Never been inside the building, but it is not, we don't believe that it's probably got all of the capacity needs that we need for the eastern end of the county. First Baptist Church, we do currently use, and it's a good facility. Little Flock Baptist Church, their gym is part of their private school. They are private. I have no ability to really come in there and say, you have to let me use it, versus what the legislature has allowed by statute for public school.
Have you asked them?
No, but it was a private building, and I know that they use their gyms as part of their educational program also. The Vendor City Flea Market, it's got a big parking lot, and physically it's a big space. Building has been vacant for a number of years. It has various things hanging from the ceiling, laying in the floor, and I have called multiple times in the last 2 years trying to reach out to the property ownership group, and they will not return my phone calls. They apparently have no interest in allowing us to use the building. The Richard Terry Hall we have used once, maybe twice. It does have a good sized parking lot, but the interior is small. I can only put about 5, maybe 7 if I really squeeze it, customer check-in locations. And we do plans based on setting up 5 check-in stations or 10. We have a large and a smaller venue, the way we set them up, and they get 40 or 80 tabletops. That building is not small. I have enough room to set up the 5 check-ins without any issues, but I don't have the space to set up a full complement of all the tables for the voters to mark their ballots on. I'm familiar with every one of these locations that is mentioned. And we're not ignoring them because of any one thing. When we look at them on the whole, they are not the same as what we gain by getting into the public school buildings, which are large gyms, good parking, and ADA type access that's made available.
Any other questions or comments?
Secretary, may I add a comment?
Sure.
So I just want to, I know Kevin mentioned this earlier, but I was there for many of the hearings with the legislator in regards to the polling locations that were not sufficient in 2022. And I want to remind the board that during that time, the legislator was looking for solutions. This was the solution for that problem. The amount of footage that was filmed with voters standing in line outside of locations was remarkable. And we have to solve that problem. As a complete state, all 120 counties had to come up with a better plan to address those concerns in 2024. As we know, Karen and I have presented a couple times together recently. 2024 is set to be our largest turnout that we've ever experienced in the state of Kentucky. That's going to include those days of early voting, as more of those voters have found out about early voting and they continue to utilize that resource. We as county clerks and the State Board of Elections have to be prepared for that onslaught of people. We have to be determined to make sure that this gets the amount of respect that it deserves. Our voters deserve to be able to vote in accessible locations. We've had that conversation at the last meeting about accessibility. But we also have to make sure that we do not have extremely long lines, or we will all be on the national news in a negative light. That is not what Kentucky wants. As Secretary Adams has mentioned many times, we are the gold standard. We want to continue to be that in Kentucky, and we want Clerk Mooney to be successful in that as well. So I'll leave you with those comments.
Okay, anyone else? So I think we have three options. One option is to approve the plan. One option is to disapprove the plan. The third option would be to take another week and perhaps my staff, SBE staff, visit these alternative locations and see if they're better or at least workable, and then come back in a week and make a final decision.
Mr. Secretary, I just want to ask that the record reflect that I am recusing myself on this one matter.
So noted. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I would move that we take the third option.
I'll second.
Surely we can take another week, and with your involvement and your staff's involvement, and maybe with the Board of Election staff involvement, surely we can come to some kind of a compromise that doesn't cause the school district to have what I consider to be a very, very bad result. And we, of course, don't want to have a problem with the election. Surely if we all pull together in the next week and figure out some alternative, we can get there.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I guess I have a point, Mr. Secretary, and I see both sides of this, and I certainly don't object to waiting another week. And I do hope we can reach a compromise and a resolution that would be better for everyone. But ultimately, we're going to have to be prepared to vote on this. And so I just think in fairness to the county, we shouldn't go beyond the next week. So, if we get to our next meeting, I'm going to be prepared to call a vote on it because we need to allow the clerk's office to prepare and move forward. So I have no objection to this, but we can't keep kicking the can, it seems to me, after this.
I totally agree. And to put this into perspective, we've approved 118 county plans, technically 119. We're going to take one up in just a moment and presumably reauthorize it. But we're way ahead of schedule compared to last year. So I don't think that we lose anything by waiting a week. I know Kevin, all of us are desirous of moving on and getting to work on this, but I don't think any harm will arise if we wait another 7 days.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. So I will try to get down there myself. If not, I'll have Heather on my staff go down and look at some of these sites, and maybe we can work together. Kevin, maybe you can join us for a site visit also. Karen, Richard, whoever's available from SBE, and we'll try to get this all worked out in the next week. Is that doable?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think all we have left under this item of business is that Kenton County has changed since we approved it, and so we need to vote again on Kenton County.
Mr. Adams, may we be excused from
certainly.
Bullitt County? Thank
Yes,
you, sir.
absolutely. Thank you for attending. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Of course. Okay. Karen, would you walk us through what Kenton has changed in their plan?
I'm gonna let Richard, he worked very closely with Gabe on this. So I'll defer to Richard to explain.
To sum it up, they have moved two locations to different locations. They have taken two locations that were in one precinct and moved it into one new location due to ADA compliance issues, bee issue that you read about in the letter, and then black mold issue. So they've technically, before we started, when we approved the first plan, they had 38 locations. They added an extra vote center on election day in Covington at the Northern Kentucky Convention Center. So they were adding going into the general. And then since this, they have removed technically two locations, but a net loss of one from the previous plan. So not a significant change, still adequately covered. And also I'll add that Kenton County is that one county that has made available to be, technically they are 37 vote centers on election day. They have the ability to do that.
That answers any question I had, Secretary.
Okay. We have Gabe on. Did you want to offer any additional comment?
I appreciate the consideration in this. It's more work for us to move a location than it isn't. But I knew some of this was coming, and that's why I put in my initial plan that the board may have to meet, because we had several pieces of property that changed hands. We had a major discussion with the Department of Justice. We were waiting for some approval for some better locations, meet all the ADA requirements. And in the meantime, got an unexpected issue. Well, I actually knew it was coming, but I wanted to make sure I did my due diligence as it related to the bees. It is November. I wanted my board to be fully informed so that they could make decisions. And unfortunately, I don't know if we'll have a warm summer. You can't put leashes on bees as much as I would like. And the placement of the hives, unfortunately, that's part of their business. They're lovely people. They really worked well. We have done additional surveys in that area to find other locations. They actually meet even less ADA compliance. And I feel badly personally, because I really know that there's no other major buildings in that part of the county. And, you know, we struggled with that move, but I don't know how not to address an issue that could potentially put somebody at that kind of medical risk. And that's why our board agreed that we would move it 4 miles north into an already existing location, which is the Ryland Heights Elementary School.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Gabe or comments? If not, do we have a motion?
Changing.
So moved.
Missy, please come to bookkeeping.
So we have a motion to approve Kenton County's revised plan. Do we have a second?
I'll make a second.
All right. Yeah. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you. I appreciate the consideration.
So I think we're about done. Is there any other business before the board today? So our next meeting will be our regular meeting. That's next Tuesday, the 20th at 10 a.m. We will take up Bullitt County plus our other regular business that arises. If any member would like to join any site visits that we do in Bullitt, just let Karen and me know, and we'll try to coordinate something for everyone's benefit. And with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.